Hey class, my name is Blair, and the book I chose to talk about today is Harry Glasbeek, Class Privilege: How Corporate Law Shelters Shareholders and Coddles Capitalism. And I like this book a lot. It pertains to our class very well, and it sort of talks about the dark side of capitalism, and moreover, the dark side of when you incorporate and the powers that corporations have once they do get limited liability status, and sort of the dark environment that gets fostered and the shady business practices that can result from these powers that the corporation possess. So let's get right into it. Now, Glasbeek refers to a corporation as the blob, sort of like this monster. He has this personification of it, and it actually fits very well because a corporation has no form, it's intangible, it could be anywhere and everywhere and nowhere, sort of like some sort of weird monster with magic powers. It has an unsatisfiable appetite for profits, and it has no brain of itself and no sort of mind of itself. It has no morals. The only morals it has is what its agents, the shareholders, decide it has. And oftentimes these shareholders do bad things with this being. So that's what the book gets into, and he goes into such examples of why that the laws are out there and why bad things seem to happen when dealing with these corporations. So the first example he goes over is a wages example, an unpaid wages example. A company A goes bankrupt and tells its employees that, hey, we can't pay you the unpaid wages. They have to take it to the chin and say, okay. But almost simultaneously, they find out that their boss has started a new corporation in the same industry doing the exact same things. So they take their old boss to court and say, hey, you owe us these wages. What the hell are you doing? And the court actually rules that he was doing nothing wrong because, as it may seem like it's the same corporation doing the same thing, the source of capital is completely different from a relative of the owner, but still considered completely different. So it's considered a completely different entity, and that has nothing to do, no correlation to the old business. So the employees do not get paid their unpaid wages. So that's just one example of the shady legal powers that these corporations possess. Another one is this place in the Cayman Islands called Ugland House. That's the example he uses. And this Ugland House has 1,800 residents, none of which are humans, all of which are corporations. And such corporations that hide here in the Cayman Islands, he talks about, is Google and Microsoft. And these corporations pay very, very little taxes compared to where they would be if they were paying North American taxes. But no, in these tax haven of the Cayman Islands, where they've registered their head office and where the multitude of their business operations become, that's just not the case. And they talk about how Google paid a mere 2.5 million to the UK government for taxes when they had billions and billions of profits. So the numbers there are just ridiculous. And the amount of money that's not going back to the countries of origin that could go into helping build schools, roads, and other places where tax money goes is just head spinning, and it's unbelievable. But this is all completely legal when you incorporate. When you're an LLC, you get these magical powers, and you become the blob. You can become almost a monster that can do almost anything. And you have the blob serves one purpose, that's making profits for the shareholders. And the directors, the management team, and everyone else of the corporation is legally bound to serve these these shareholders. Unless they're registered as a benefit corporation, then it's illegal to prioritize anyone else but the shareholders' interests. And you can see where this monster, controlled by the shareholders, do evil, dirty things. And it just gets worse. Let me explain. In America, and also in North America, there's this viatical industry. And what that is, it's a life insurance industry. And in the viatical industry, death is good business. What it is a corporation will buy out someone's life insurance for a fraction of what they would have got paid out in the normal fashion. But they get this money instantly while they're alive. So they agree to such agreements. Now, when they finally do pass away and the full payout comes out, the money goes to whoever purchased the life insurance, aka the investor, and the difference is their profit. Now every month the investors have to pay a premium on this shady deal and pay the life insurance premium every month. Basically, that this person's alive, their investment is losing money because their bottom line is getting higher and higher and higher. So they actually want the individual to die as soon as possible. And corporations actually do this to their own employees. So you can see the conflict of interest is almost mind-numbing, how you want your own employees to die soon so you can make money off of them. It's unbelievable, but these corporations do it and it's completely legal. Now, it gets worse. In America, Glasbeek talked about how the prison system and the shady deals they have with the government, they have contracts where if the prison is not at 65% capacity or more, that the government has to pay the prison. So it almost seems like, how the government has to pay prison money if it's not filled? How could that be? So what happens is the government obviously, it takes measures for people to be in prison, and that means laws get stricter, probations get stricter, and the average person who maybe not have been thrown in jail for committing a crime will get thrown in jail for crime. And it just breeds a very nasty environment for law and order and just society in general. It's all for profits of these prison corporations, and they lobby millions and millions and millions to the legal system to make this happen and to make sure that their interests are met. And they're all corporations, obviously, and it's all legal. This is all considered normal, immoral maybe, but definitely legal. And it's just ugly, and Glasbeek does a great example highlighting these horror stories. Now it gets much worse. It goes from money to people's lives to actually death. And what happens was in New Guinea, there's ExxonMobil was moving in to try to do some drilling in New Guinea at this Mount Tumbai. And they went in and the locals tried to tell them not to, that the land wasn't good for drilling, but of course they didn't listen. And Exxon caused a landslide that crushed a town, killed scores of people. And then Exxon tried to go in to finish their job, and the townspeople created a blockade. They did not want them to come in. They wanted to stop their advancement. But Exxon had a private company, security company, police force, and came in and stopped the locals from blocking them. And they finished their job. And none of this was ever seen as foul play by the shareholders who owned ultimately Exxon. And nothing ever happened to the shareholders at all. In fact, nothing ever happened to almost anybody. It was considered a complete accident that the ground level people obviously never wanted to happen, but still could have been prevented. Coming back to North America, or Central America, mind you, in Guatemala, a Canadian company called Tahoe Resources did a similar thing. They went in trying to go extract precious metals in Guatemala, and the locals weren't having it. They tried to stop them, and there was a huge peaceful protest. Well, during all the action, a young girl got shot by these private security forces and died. And nothing actually ever happened to any of the shareholders or anybody in general. There's plenty of places to finger the blame, but nothing actually happened. And in Canadian courts, you could look it up. 13 years later, 14 years later, there was no one charged. So that's and convicted. So that was actually horrible. And yet again, corporations, the shareholders, are seen as they're detached from their entity, the blob, and they have nothing to do with what happens in the ground levels. They're referred to sort of as gamblers. They put their money on red, sort of like a roulette table, and as the ball spins around, they have nothing to do with it. That's in the law in the eye of the law. That's how it is seen, and it's pretty disgusting. And Glasbeek talks about how in this corporate structure, it's all completely legal, and it just creates an environment for mischief, for bad things to happen, and gives these shareholders a class privilege, a privilege that no one else seems to have, and can dodge liability that no one else in society can. Now, where does this end? Well, there's an example where the corporate veil, the limited liability shield, does get infiltrated, and it's in Nazi Germany. Now, the Nazis are asked this one company for poisons, for chemicals, ultimately for poisons, and the company sells it to them, sells the poisons to the SS, and people end up dying. And then litigation happens, and that company is convicted because it was found out that, hey, you sold poisons to these evil men, and you knew what they were going to do. There's very little doubt of what the Nazis were going to do with poison, and you continue to do that. So they actually got tried and convicted. There's political forces there that persuaded this, as well as just logic, and at the ground level, that's how this corporate veil could get pierced. Is if it's so obvious that the ground level was going to do something evil with the action that happened. So that's what this book's about, and I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was super awesome that it pertained so much to this class, and I would recommend to anyone. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.